now.
Okay. I think it's good on my
All
end.
right. Wonderful. So we're here to talk about the same couple?
Yeah. Same couple. So I met with them on Wednesday. They both came into session, and what ended up happening was they had a really big fight, and they had not seen each other for three days. So that was the first time they were seeing each other, was in our session. So they kind of both came in, and there was some awkwardness just in terms of like seeing one another, kind of both were a little quiet. And what ended up happening was they went to a party, and they drove with somebody, and they were quite a hectic driver. And one of the clients has really bad anxiety just around driving, but both ended up having a really stressful time getting to the party. Client A ended up having really bad anxiety and mentioned to client B that they were really wanting to go home. Client A
is the pursuer or withdrawer?
Pursuer. Yeah. Okay. And so client A mentioned like wanting to go home, really anxious. And client A felt they were dismissed because client B didn't want to go. Client B mentioned though that they were really in their anxiety just kind of from that whole drive. So that's where it kind of started. They ended up going home. And what ended up happening was they kind of planned to have sex, and client A was getting ready. They got together, ended up just watching an episode first. Client B wanted to continue watching just another episode, and client A got upset because they said like, I got ready, I was, prepped, and then they didn't want to. Client B felt that, they just wanted to watch another episode, didn't mean that it wasn't going to happen, but client A just completely shut that down.
Sorry, client A shut it down? Oh, shut down the conversation about the explanation of I just want another episode.
Yeah, and was like, I'm just going to go to, they were like, I'm tired, I'm going to bed. So what ended up happening is the whole night, there was a lot of tossing and turning. It was kind of a fight throughout the night. Client A wasn't like verbally saying anything as to what was upsetting them, but was like going to the couch, sleeping. It was a lot of the whole night of like kind of out of the bed, in the bed, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, non-verbally, yeah.
Yeah. Client B woke up and client A was sleeping in the dark by kind of like in the hallway. And they were both kind of hungover the next morning. And what ended up happening was they got into a really big fight. Client A told him to get out of his apartment. There was a lot of like
then this is the next morning, or
yeah, the next morning. So there was a lot of things said, a lot of anger. Client B left, and then client A texted saying they were having chest pains. I guess they had heart issues before. So client B went over, but really struggled to be there just because of all the things that were said that morning. So, client B said, I'll take you to the hospital. Client A didn't want to go. What ended up happening was client A said, or texted client B saying like they did go to the hospital. And it just kind of went from there of like texting, and then they they were going to chat, but they decided to wait till session to kind of meet and talk. So client B has kind of been struggling with everything that was said, and client A was really upset, not feeling heard, not like the unfairness, which is a big one for them. And that's
what was the climax? Was it just A saying a lot of kind of mean things, and
yeah, that was it for client B.
Then B like shut down and walked away, or?
So client A said a lot of things, and client B felt like it was just a lot. They don't really know what to think of all the things that were said. They left because they were told to basically get the F out of the apartment. Right. So they didn't really
and when they came back with the so the climax was before B came back, right? And for like the heart issues, and they just didn't discuss it again. It was just very much like about your heart issues.
Yeah. And then they kind of waited till Wednesday to have the conversation.
Right. But they were still like sleeping in the same bed those few days, or separate?
No, they don't live together.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. They just, makes sense. Okay. And then how did the session go?
So we kind of started with just discussing from client B wanted to talk or didn't want to talk first, but client A just wasn't ready. They just got home from work. They were not for talking. So client B kind of walked me through their video camera, so to speak, of just kind of how it all went down. And client A kind of jumped in towards the end and said, there was parts left out that they felt. So what we did, just because they kind of felt they wanted to go through everything, was we started with the anxiety at the beginning, because client B struggles, or client A brought up that client B struggles with driving, and he is always there for him. If he needs to stop driving in the middle of the road, he will be there, but he doesn't feel that client B is there for him when he's having anxiety. Right. So we did an enactment where they were able to kind of discuss. Client B didn't understand that it was to that like extent, the severity of their anxiety for client A. They mentioned just, they were in their own anxiety from the drive. So it was difficult to be there or even comprehend the other person's anxiety when they were struggling as well. And client A ended up understanding that. And like they both kind of connected on that. And then what ended up happening was right after that, client A kind of circled back again to, but I'm always there for their anxiety. They're not there for mine, even though there was an understanding.
So when you say there was an enactment, are you saying there was an enactment from B to A and A understood? That was the enactment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because client A kind of softened and client B was able to express like why they didn't understand that their anxiety was to that extent. They thought they just wanted to go home.
Right.
And
so what helped B understand? Did A also do an enactment?
They both kind of did. So client B went first and client A softened so that client B kind of would be able to express their side of it.
Right.
And then client A was like, okay, that makes sense why you weren't able to be there. But then it kind of circled back again to, but you're not there for my anxiety.
So did A get to that point where they were able to soften and share what was underneath the anxiety for them?
Yes, a little bit. They were able to. They were able to. It was interesting because client A usually is pretty, I would say, like just vocal in how they talk. Yeah. And they were able to kind of, their voice even softened. They were getting really teary-eyed and just said like, my anxiety really bad.
Yeah. And then B was able to understand. And then at what point did you run into this challenge of them saying that I don't think you understand? Or
so they both did this enactment where they went back, both were able to, and it almost seemed like there was an understanding. And then it was almost like not a switch, but it just kind of maybe a couple seconds after they sat, client A and was like, but I don't feel like, it kind of brought back up of like, I don't feel heard. Like why, or it was the unfairness again.
So I don't feel heard right now in this moment or at the time?
In general. So it's a generalized thing of a sense of unfairness, and it's unfair to them that they're there for the client B's anxiety.
Okay, I got it. Yeah. And what did you do with that?
I'm
guessing there might not have been a lot of time at that point, right?
There wasn't. Yeah. Which was difficult. I think it would have been great for an extended session for sure. So we kind of discussed it a bit more just from where they were coming from. And then when that started, I watched client B kind of withdraw again. And
yeah, and I think if you had time, you can go there. Now, did you get to do a good kind of, we call it tying the bow on the ribbon, this idea of like integrating what just happened? Did you get a chance, or did it just kind of, that switch you talked about, did it just kind of happen?
It just kind of like, it felt like we were kind of going through it, and then they both understood each other, and there was like this almost like a hand on one another, like really just
Right.
connecting, and then
Yeah.
it was like a switch.
Right. It's kind of like you're basking in like the connection, which is a
Yeah.
byproduct of understanding each other. And you as a counselor want to be like, oh yeah, now is where you hug. Now is, so, and I've seen it happen. So I'm not going to try to explain what happened because I can't say for sure. But one thing you can do is do the integration piece.
Okay.
And the point of the integration is to be able to just say, look, here's what we were able to do today. Okay. So, whoever started, so B was able to share this with you. You were able to give him a good response. And then A, you were able to take a risk, and B, you were able to give him a reassuring response. Okay. Now, wow, isn't that amazing? Like, what would that be like if we could take this out of here and be able to do this at home, right? Or wherever they're at home, right? Like this connection between in session and out of session. We want to bridge that gap, right? That's the idea. So if at home they're not doing this yet, oh, this could be the point at which you talk about, let's try this at home, right? But don't go beyond what we did here today. Let's just get up to the point where we're at today. Here's where we make new ground. But at home is where you reinforce that learning, and you have these two doors. And now that you've taken this risk in here, now at home, you're always going to have these two options. You're going to have your default, you're going to have your old cycle to always kind of go back to, but you've got this new door, the recency effect, what we just did just now in this moment, because it's the most recent thing. Now it's going to be this new door to walk through. And you're still going to have that choice. But if you go through this door, this new door that we're creating, even though it's not kind of a well-formed neural pathway yet, it's a possibility that if you keep walking through it and continue to get a good result like you did today, you'll be able to make that pathway stronger, and then the old pathway will start to weaken because it's not as necessary, because it's this new direct route that you have to be able to. Okay, so you have this whole thing. Now, when I give this speech, I do try to pay attention to how is all of this landing for them? Are they really able to absorb what I'm saying? If I'm not getting that sense, then it often means that, so in this case, A, when they did their enactment, either they weren't fully in their primary, or they were, and the response they got was not reassuring enough. It wasn't like what their body needed. Or third option is the expression was vulnerable, the way that landed was good, the way it's expressed back is good, but, so this is the third option, everything went perfect in this moment in time, but because of all the pain from the past and all the past experiences, the A can't let that in. It's too difficult. So what you have to do there, you have to really slow down and create this mixed experience emotion where, like, wow, this is exactly what I want. And I actually had this happen this week, 2 days ago with a couple. And I'm like, how was that for you? And he's like, and this is a male pursuer, female withdrawer. So it's different than your norm. And he goes, yeah, it's good. It's just like, yeah, it's good. She gave him the perfect response. It was very heartfelt, but yeah, it's good. Oh, okay. So can you talk to me more about good? Yeah, it's just good. Your body language isn't telling you it's good. Is this hard to let in? Yeah, it's really hard. I'm like, oh, okay. Talk to me about that. What is this? This is really what you wanted. Like this is the opposite of the fear that you just told me you had. And he goes, yeah, I just want to give up. Like, okay. All right. So that's my couple. But now I can open up this mixed experience. So is this what you wanted? Yeah, it is. Okay. Can you let her know that? No, I can't let her know that. Okay. So it's exactly what you want. So so B, it's nothing to do with how you shared. You did perfect. This isn't even about you. A is having an experience right now. Let's open up that experience, right? Let's find out what's actually going on. So even though it's not what I want, even though I'm getting exactly what I want, it's too good to be true, right?
Yeah.
Because one, I'm afraid that this won't continue. Two, it's scary to let it in.
Yeah.
Because what does that mean? I'm going to go back to the scary place where it's exactly what I want, but I'm associating this with pain. When I allow myself to feel good, relationship is good, that's exactly when, I get kicked, like when I'm least expecting it. That's the experience you sometimes have to look out for, where it's, even though the expression might be perfect, the response to it might be perfect, it's all the past experience that from this relationship, maybe from past relationships where you're getting exactly what you want, but right around the corner, you're expecting something bad. So that can be a new enactment.
Okay.
Even though this is what I want, I'm so afraid to let this in.
Okay.
Even though this is exactly what I want, I'm worried that tomorrow or tonight when we get home, you're just going to tell me that you didn't mean it. Right? Whatever the fear is. And that's what you can turn right away into another enactment. Because it's all about reassurance of like, this fear just needs to be soothed.
And that I'm thinking, Ofir, that sounds pretty accurate for what was going on just in that moment, because we kind of discussed even the moment in watching the episode of TV and not engaging in sex, and clients be mentioned, like I wasn't aware that that's what you wanted right then. And they just kind of discussed like that, of course they wanted that, they just didn't know per se. And then there was like an understanding, and then it kind of came up where the switch went, where client A was like, but why is it like I got ready and I always try, and then I don't feel like they try for me.
Yeah. So there's two pieces there. There's obviously the underlying belief there that comes up.
Yeah.
Because of past experiences. But ultimately, most of the time, it's not even because of past experiences in this relationship. It's the sensitivity that's created from past experiences from childhood generally, right? And that sensitivity creates this sensitivity to seeing the other person doesn't care. And that just gets manifested in all these different situations, right? And so that's part one, that this belief from the past. And that creates the sensitivity. And part two is there's the actual experience that is it could be a traumatic experience. I'm reaching out, I'm getting ready, I'm ready for you, I'm letting you know I'm ready. That's already hard for me. That's like an enactment. I'm here waiting for you, and we talked about this, and I've got this expectation, and you're turning away from me, and you're asking for another episode. That must mean something. That must mean you don't care. And then there's this traumatic experience, but really it's not traumatic today. It's just a re-experiencing of old trauma.
Okay.
And that's important to be able to share, right? And that's it's not enough to just say, yeah, here's what was going on for me. Now you're going to understand that it wasn't that I don't care. It's not enough. It's that person needs to be able to share. This was really painful. Like, it was so painful. And then that night was so painful. I couldn't tell you, you're the enemy. I was turning and tossing and going back. I was trying to let you know I'm in pain, and you didn't hear me. It's like this huge experience of that whole night. Right. That's what you really want to expand. And that they really need to know. A needs to know, B really gets it, really understands, and really feels not necessarily remorseful, but really connects to A's pain around it.
And
that's what'll help them heal. Yeah.
And just like when you said about the belief, I'm curious if that's also what was happening with even just the situation with the anxiety, because it came back to the unfairness, that it's not fair that I'm there for others and they're not there for me during my mental health crisis, so to speak.
Yeah, and that for the most part is more a perception than it is an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a belief that's formed almost as a way to protect him.
Okay.
Right. So I I give, not only is it that, but it's also it's the long story of my life where it's like I want, or I always am the one that has to do more than the other person. If I'm the one, and I'm okay with it, but I expect the reciprocity. And if I don't get the reciprocity in the way that I think it needs to happen, then it's like I'm always the one doing more. And it discounts B's attempts to
Yeah.
also give back. But it also just, again, it's, this is more of attachment generalization, but we tend to project our beliefs and childhood experiences onto both our relationship, onto who we pick, onto the relationship, then onto individual moments in that relationship. That we can go, this is how it is, because it's protective. It's the dynamic we have in our head around, this is how I value myself as a person, and this is how I see others value me. And to break that is really painful, because it means they have to almost go back to, you know, the bad side of a trigger is you go back to a painful event. The good side of a trigger in the sense of healing is you again have to go back to an event where you go back to, let's say, when you were vulnerable and you had a good life. That could be like when you're 2 months old, where you're just well adjusted and have a secure attachment, and you go back to that place where you were hurt. And that is both the moment at which you go back to and are getting triggered and are reacting from your coping. And it's also the place where you have the potential to heal. It's that same moment, because that's the moment where you reached out to mom, she wasn't there for you, or to dad, or to brother, sister, whatever. And you were longing for the thing, and you'd got the other thing. You were longing for the real need to be met, and for whatever reason it wasn't met. So coping came out. So these moments that you're triggered back to have both the recipe for both the pain to be reinforced or the solution to heal.
Okay. So in that moment, Ofir, like if even just looking at the moment of getting ready and being ready for the other person, and then like client A was able to soften a bit, and client B was able to kind of express where they were coming from. But client A kind of circled back to the feeling of the generalized feeling, not just in that moment. Like they were like, oh, like in that moment when they were kind of doing an enactment, and client A was like, okay, so maybe they were like, I need to express that, hey, I'm tired and I would like to, to engage in sex, and vocalize that versus just assuming. And they mentioned that.
Yeah, that's around solutions. And, in a perfect world, we could be preventative and proactive, but what's more realistic is this is going to happen again.
Yeah.
And instead of thinking this is what you need to do instead, what you want to do is have the experience where I'm hurt and I can come to you right away.
Yeah.
And not toss and turn all night. And that's more realistic, because when you do the enactment and it goes well in the session, a part of you remembers that, and a part of you goes, when you get triggered again, goes, that person's the enemy. That's the default cycle. And at the same time, they're the enemy. I'm hurt. A part of me realizes I can go back to them. I can talk to this person. And because I just did it in the session, like a few days ago. And it's a risk. It's a big risk because they're in pain. But if they do it and it goes well, then you make huge strides.
And I noticed that in the first, like when we were first doing enactments, just around the anxiety, because they were starting to tear up and really say like their anxiety was so bad, and client client B kind of expressed like not knowing, and had they known, they would have been there. And like there was a really good connection, and they kind of really connected in that moment. And then a couple minutes later was when the feeling of not being, like, they kind of went back to the wound, so to speak.
Yeah. So I would want to open that up. Like, I would want to know what's happening for him in that moment for A. So is it that you heard it and it felt good, and then something switched in you where you remembered, oh yeah, well, but you won't do this at home. This isn't real, or these painful, like, there's a moment that you want to open up, like what just happened, right?
When they kind of switched there to being like kind of going back towards the like, it's there, that's when I should have opened it up then.
Yeah, what happened? Like, I just noticed you were letting it in, or my perception is you were letting it in, it felt good, and then something happened. What just happened? What did you remember? What are you remembering right now? You almost want to cut it off, because it's the kind of cutoff that will prevent them experiencing more pain. And you're helping them slow it down and to kind of catch what just happened. And when you externally, you being their external brain, are able to do that with them, they're going to then in the future be able to have that opportunity to do that for themselves. To
kind of recognize like,
because you're kind of stopping them right there in their tracks about what is going on, right? If you let them go on too long with it, that experience gets solidified. It gets almost validated in a way.
Okay.
But you stop it and you go, what's happening right now? In the same way that you would kind of referee when something's getting too escalated, not just to end the escalation, but to also go like, look, there's something here that like is like gold. Like, everything we need is right here. If I let you go on too long, I don't need more of that. Like, I already have. Because then I have a higher likelihood of losing it. Because the further I stray from that moment where it happened, the more escalated they are, the harder it is to get them to switch to their primary.
Okay. So kind of catching them in that moment when they're doing that switch of going back to like sitting in that.
Yeah. And now that you know that this is a risk for A, in the future, you can actually go, hey, what is this like for you? I imagine it's not easy to let this in. Can you talk to me about that? Like, what percentage right now are you able to let in? Like, you can break it down into, did you hear him? Did you hear what he said? What was it like? And then open that up for me. Was it, if they say, oh yeah, it was good. And if you don't feel 100% like it was good, when someone's good, they don't go, I'm fine, or it's good, right? They generally open up. They're like, oh my God, this is so good. I feel so much. They actually have no problem talking about it. But when it's short and their nonverbals are not really adding up, you're like, let's fully open this up to make sure that you're good. That it really, you were able to let this in. And when I say let it in, the good aspect of it, that let in, that what you wanted them to do, the reassurance, the understanding, the compassion that came from them to you, that you're able to let that in, and you're not going back to your memories and applying past events where you thought you were enacting something. And really, you probably weren't. Really, you were being critical, and they responded this way, and you thought it was you being vulnerable. But it's connected enough to this moment where you were being vulnerable, and just vulnerable without the daggers and whatever else that comes with it.
Yeah.
And to show when you're purely vulnerable, look at your partner. They're there for you. When you throw in, I'm vulnerable, but you. Okay, all they're going to hear is the you. Maybe you were vulnerable, but because it came with the you, they couldn't stay with you and give you what you need, because they were triggered by the you or the but blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's why. That's why they're coming. But they're remembering all these times, because yes, those past events when, you know, their therapist wasn't in the room with them, they were vulnerable. It wasn't easy for them. But that's not enough. It's not enough to just be vulnerable. You've got to be vulnerable and be absent of triggers for your partner.
Okay. So going into next session, keeping in mind then like those moments and kind of, I don't want to call them calling them out, but like bringing light to those moments.
Yeah, it's harder in general for pursuers to let in a warm response.
Okay.
Right? A warm response to their enactment. They can be there for their partner when their partner's enacting, usually. But when they're being vulnerable, remember, pursuers are the ones with the underlying message of I'm not lovable.
Yeah.
So here the person is telling me in certain words, you are lovable. I care about you. You matter to me. And what do you think comes up? No, that can't be real. My experience doesn't really concur with what you're saying to me right now and how you're saying it. And the protection has to come in place of like, prove it to me. You have to prove it to me even deeper. It's not enough, right? And then of course, that's the withdrawer's vulnerability of I'm not enough, and it's never good enough. No matter how hard I try, I can't make them happy.
Yeah.
And so those clash.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
So
Yeah.
it's again, slowing it down, owning up. It's really hard for me to let this in, so that the withdrawer doesn't, or B doesn't think I did something wrong. It's really important for them to know they did exactly what they needed to do. There's nothing wrong in what they did. And that this goes way back, way before they met B, this difficulty to let something good in.
Okay.
Because the underlying attachment belief is I'm not lovable.
Yeah.
They didn't come into this relationship thinking they're lovable. They came in thinking they're not lovable.
And the withdrawer thinking that they're not like enough per se.
That what they do is not enough to make the other person happy. It's around like, I'm a failure, I'm not good enough. It's not that I'm not lovable, it's that my effort is not good enough. It's more about that.
Okay.
So, because generally speaking, the way a pursuer frames what they want and what they need and what they offer as love is through doing things and through gestures. So it's like, look, I do this for you and I do this for you, and you can't even do this for me. Or I do all this work in the house and you do this little. Or, you know, you're not doing enough for me, right? And it's, you know, and it's true from their perspective, they're always doing. And so part of it is they don't think that if they believe if they stop doing, that other person B would leave.
Yeah.
And they also, part of what keeps it going is they get their what I call like indirect needs, not the real needs. They get their substitute needs met through the withdrawer responding to their indirect, to their criticisms. So, hey, I need your help. Even if I yell it, if you come and respond to me, even though it's out of fear, let's say, or it's out of, you know, the way I'm talking to you, it's meeting my need for connection. Even though I'm asking you put up the curtains and then they come and do it, they're not really meeting my need because I'm not really being vulnerable. I'm, you know, yelling to you, go come help me with the curtains. They come and respond. So in a way that them responding is like this indirect need. The reason it's indirect is first of all, they're doing something for me. And on some level, they know they're doing it because of the way I asked, not because of, if they really loved me, or if I really felt good about myself, I can just say, hey, can you come help me? I wouldn't have to be critical about it. And they would and I would believe that they would respond. Hey, it would really mean a lot to me if you did this. And then they come and do it. Yeah. I just have to plug my computer in.
It's okay.
It's gonna die. I have it here. I just didn't plug it in. All right. There you go. Plugged in.
Well, thank you for that, Ofir. I think I have a better idea now of like how to go in for next, just to go into next session a little bit more prepared, I think, just because it was probably the first time that they brought something in so raw and real in that very like just happened. And I think that's what kind of caught me off.
Well, yeah, and I don't think you had experience before when a pursuer is enacting, and you would think, oh, B is responding so well, they should just be able to let it in. They got what they want.
Yeah.
And yeah, it happens. It happens quite often. It's hard. It's hard for pursuers to let in. That unlovable piece is so deep that for some pursuers, especially if it's like, you know, like a lifelong thing, that they create these hoops, right? Like just extremely, whether it's multiple hoops or whether it's like this almost like it has to be done so perfect. They'll look for a way out. Like it can't mean that.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, and sometimes even if it's perfect, they'll find something that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Or it's about the future. Yeah, you did it great now. The most common one I get is, oh yeah, it's because he made you do it. Like that therapist made you say that. If he wasn't here, that you wouldn't be doing that. So they're discounting their own, that it's anything to do with how they shared.
Huh.
That's the most common. Yeah. So I go, so you think if I wasn't here in the room right now, that they wouldn't have responded? Oh, 100%, they'll say. 100% they would not be responding this way. So when I sometimes will say, so I don't remember telling them to respond this way. They added that part on their own. Did you remember that? But there's no point, but there's no real point to argue with it, because ultimately it's about letting it in. And a lot of times too, it's like, okay, yeah, we keep coming in and they keep doing it here in the session, but they don't do it at home. And I share just like this at home, just like I do in the session. I share just like that. And I can go, yeah, well, I'm sure if I had a drone follow you and watch that moment that you think you're just purely, there would be something.
Yeah.
And then if in the few cases I've said that, please, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's bring a video camera. They're like, you know, so don't do that. Don't ask them to record. But yeah, their belief is really that like, this is almost like a charade. They don't really care. They're just doing it, you know, just keep the wool over my eyes. It's really, again, it's like they clutch on to the story because it's safe. As bad as things are right now, you know, it's safe to hold on to this belief because they're used to it, right? The reason we enter relationships that will mimic those early attachment relationships is because that's where we feel safe. Even though it's not what we want or ever needed, it's what we know.
Yeah.
And the other side to that is like unconsciously, we're trying to get back to those situations so we can heal from them.
Yeah.
We can't pick someone if we have a insecure attachment, we can't pick someone secure. We can't let that in. It's too foreign. It's like if you're anxious and you meet someone secure, if you're like, you know, if you're not really close to being secure, if you're like quite anxious, and you meet someone secure, you're like, they're too available.
Yeah.
Like what's wrong with that, right? There's something wrong with them. And if well, same on the withdrawer side, if you meet someone secure, yeah, it can be like they're too needy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. On the withdrawer side, oh no. On the withdrawer side, if you meet someone secure, they want too much from me.
Oh.
I have to do some work. It's not enough that I could just be my withdrawer self.
They want, yeah.
They actually want to meet me in the middle. This is like not right. It's not fair. It's too exposing. It's too overwhelming.
And I often picture it just as that spectrum, like you kind of explained it. That's really helped me kind of understand there's not just these like certain ones. It's kind of
Oh yeah. Yeah.
a spectrum.
And there's dimensions to it too, because in different contexts, you might be different.
Yeah.
At work, right? You might be different. In friendships, you might be different than you will be in romantic relationships, because it's safer, and you know, you're not as vulnerable, I guess, in relationships or in friendships.
Yeah.
You know, you're vulnerable maybe to a different extent. And then it's also different potentially with like even with the same person, it's different in different contexts. In areas where you have like high like efficacy, like with money, for example, maybe you've got a male withdrawer, but when it comes to money, they're not a withdrawer. Maybe they're just in the middle, or maybe anxious. But in that domain, they're like, I'm really good with the finances.
Yeah.
And they're not a withdrawer there.
So in different, I guess, different areas of life or different like aspects.
Yeah.
There.
And then you want to get even more complicated, where in the same relationship over time, things will shift.
Yeah.
Or after there's a huge event like cheating or an abandonment, things can shift temporarily, not forever.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
You go back, right? You go back to your original, but it can switch.
It'll go back if it's healed, if the trauma is healed. Yeah.
But you can switch, I guess, if there was like a trauma or something in the relationship.
Yeah. It's so this is a bigger topic, but I've got 1 minute here. I would say, like, to keep it short, when you have a pursuer or withdrawer without huge trauma, it's kind of clean cut. But if you've got a pursuer that's, let's say, been in a relationship where there's physical trauma, like physical abuse, well, they're still a pursuer. But the moment the guy lifts their hand up, they become a withdrawer, because that's connected to the trauma.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or the moment that they get angry. So it's like, I'm a pursuer, but the moment my partner gets angry, oh, that's related to my trauma. I have to back out.
It's so complex how it's not just clean cut. And I think that's what
makes it interesting.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ofir. I really appreciate it.
No problem. All right, we'll see you next week.
All right.
On Monday, I guess. Yeah.
All right, I may have to switch that, but I can text you about it.
That's okay.
All right.
Sounds good. All right.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.